I'm told that it's 1:30, actually after 1:30, and we have to get started. So let me start by welcoming you all to Hemlock Society's January meeting. It's our first meeting in this new venue. We hope you like it. We love it. We have a big program today, a long program. Not really long, but there's a number of people going to speak. As you know from the flyer and the information on the internet, today's program has to do with personal stories or personal experiences with the End of Life Option Act in California. And we're very fortunate to have with us family members of people who have used the End of Life Option Act. We want to hear what their experience was. And I think it's important all of us get a little better sense of what actually is involved from a family member's point of view, and that's what we're going to do today. That's the program today. And I guess without any further ado, I'm going to introduce to you two sisters who accompanied their mom through the End of Life Option Act, Marge and Loretta. And they're going to tell us a little bit about what their experience was and how they felt and a little bit about their mom and how she ended up making that choice. So I'm going to let them start.
Good afternoon. I'm Marge Wergel.
I'm Loretta Salisbury.
And our third sister here, Carmen, is sitting in. And we had an almost perfect death in our family. Our mother, Lorna Kruger, she was a vivacious, we thought very healthy woman, and the experience that we went through is such a positive one. We want to share it with others and encourage you all to talk with your families, open up the conversation, and make what could be a very difficult process be much easier.
We're really glad you're all here and hope that what we have to say answers some questions that you might have, and fortunately you'll have a chance to ask some. As far as Mom, a little background, our family had a very open discussion about dying. Our father was a life insurance salesperson, so it was natural, a natural discussion in our household about the end of life. And so we came by it naturally. And then when Dr. Tomita was at the center in Hillcrest, the LGBTQ center, he and his group of folks shared with my mother and me. We went to hear the talk before the act was made legal. It was a few months, I think, before. And so Mom was at that, in that conversation from that time on. And then Mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I'll let you share a little bit about that.
Mom didn't know that she was sick. She found a lump in her abdomen, went to the doctor, and over a period of 2 weeks had a variety of medical tests and learned that she had metastasized cancer in many organs of her body. She was still feeling perfectly fine. And then it was a process over the next 2 months of her going through getting sick, choosing the End of Life Option Act, and then taking her life with the blessed assistance of a physician. And we had already, as Loretta said, talked about death. And so the day that Mom went to the doctor to check on this lump and get test results, all three of us daughters went with her. And the doctor said she had less than 6 months to live, and started to talk about what her medical treatment options were. And Mom said, "You don't even need to go there. I'm not interested in being treated. I'm 83 years old. I have had a full life My family and I all believe in having a choice with dignity for death, and so we went home that afternoon and started calling hospice programs and found a hospice program, the Interim Healthcare, which was an extraordinary organization that supported the End of Life Option Act. The doctor did not bring it up. People have to ask for it. Medical personnel are not permitted to tell anybody about it. So by your knowing about it now, you can engage in that conversation. If we hadn't known that, we would have been in a whole different position. And it takes a minimum of 2 weeks, a little over that, 15 days, very minimum, between the time a physician is contacted and met with or consulted with the patient, and a second physician visit, and then can put into motion getting the medication that can end the life. But it can take more than that, and so we're here to encourage engaging in it as soon as one thinks that might be a desirable option.
Other reasons to act quickly if you think you might possibly want to use this option is because, I believe it's still in litigation here, and so we were in a very precarious position because at any moment it could have been, what do you call it, not abandoned, but put a hold on it. And so time was in essence because of the legalities. But it was also, not only could the law change, but Mom's ability to take the medicine was rapidly changing. And had we waited a couple more days even, she might not have been able to drink the medicine. So also her mental faculties, we noticed some changes of her mental faculties and the last few days. And so the person taking the medicine has to legally be of right mind, of solid right mind. And so thank goodness she still had her wits about her, but it could have changed real quickly. If you do sign up for it, though, that doesn't mean you have to take it. It just keeps your options available. And then, let's see. Also, a reason to act quickly to get it all set up is because the pharmacies, not all the pharmacies, will fill the prescription. So finding a pharmacy, and the interim healthcare helped us. The other folks, I'm sure, would be able to help you find the resource to get the medicine filled.
So all three of us daughters were on board with it. We had time to spend beautiful time with Mom. She had relatives come in from out of town and say goodbye. And her physical abilities and a little bit with her mental faculties were starting to go down. So things happened rather rapidly for us. Also want to mention that Medicaid does cover the cost of the drug. Medicare does not. And so if somebody doesn't have much money and is on Medicare, they're still going to have to cover the cost themselves if they aren't on Medicaid or Medi-Cal. So that's just something to keep in mind. And it's expensive. It can go, depending on which of the formulations is used, it can go between $500 and $600 all the way up to $4,000. So it's something
was a couple years ago.
Yeah, I don't know where it is right now. So we were all supporting her. Oh, I started talking where you are.
Well, go ahead.
So Mom chose a day where she thought that's when she would want to take the medication. And we gathered with her. She was excited in the morning when she woke up to know that she was able to end her own life on her own terms and be fully with it as she made that choice and be surrounded by family. She also wanted to be supported by the physician who had written off on her ability to use this medication. So the four of us were there. And we brought her flowers. We kind of got dressed up. We did sort of a little service. Loretta and I are Buddhist, and we did a little bit of a Buddhist service with her. Each of us said goodbye to her. We had pictures, but apparently they couldn't be brought up today. But Mom was totally at peace with it, knowing that she had that choice. And so during that day, we played some Scrabble in the morning. We had a lunch together, even though she was no longer able to eat. And then we were able to say our goodbyes. Loretta wrote a beautiful poem for her and shared that. And it was a very deeply connecting, bonding time with her.
Just a little side note, when we talk about the physician being there, and this is a physician's assisted dying, it doesn't mean that the physician actually mixes the concoction and gives it to the person. We as family members mixed it up, and the part that the physician assists in is in writing the prescription. That's the part of the physician's assistance. And then Mother had to physically pick up the drink and drink it herself. And she had to do it very quickly. For her, swallowing had become very difficult. And and you have to do it in 5 minutes. You have to drink it in 5 minutes because the medicine is so fast acting that she may have lost the ability to drink the whole thing. So she was so diligently, trying to get it down, and just as she finishes it and goes to hand the cup, she was out. And it was, so there's nothing we can do to encourage you to drink faster, but to just know that time is in an essence.
So she drank it, she passed out, and we stayed with her, touching her, holding her. And we had heard that she may pass away within about 10 minutes, or it could be up to an hour and a half. And when an hour and a half passed and she was still alive but unconscious, we were getting worried. The doctor ended up calling people up in Oregon that it had experienced. They said, no, it'll still happen, it'll happen. After 3 hours of sitting with her, the doctor had to leave. He had no idea he would be there that long.
That was the longest he had ever seen it take on anybody.
And then he called in the hospice nurse, and she came and sat with us as well. It was an emotional time, but we still were able to say things to her, sang a little bit, talked with each other, shared a little bit of food with the doctor and then with the nurse. It took 5 hours for her to die. So we don't know.
5 hours is little compared to what so many people suffer, weeks, months, years. 5 hours now, looking back, doesn't seem like very long, but it's the longest 5 hours in our life.
But during that time, there was no suffering. Actually, Mother had almost no suffering from the time she was diagnosed through this whole time. By the end, she was starting to have a little bit of pain. She had very slight doses of morphine, but more or less no pain. She had time to say goodbye to everybody. All of her relatives came and visited. Almost all. I guess one uncle or one of her brothers couldn't make it. We had time to put all of her affairs in order. She didn't have any money, so that wasn't a big issue, but photographs, going through her things, we took things that we thought we might like. So we had plenty of time to be able to go through the whole process together. Do you want to share any of your emotions since?
Since. Okay.
Or not since?
It has been very, very rewarding knowing that she didn't suffer and that she lived on her own up to the moment of her death. It was really important for her to not burden us. Not that, we would have been very happy, or, well, not happy, but willing and able to walk whatever way she chose. But there was such relief that she didn't suffer. And of course, there's been grief. Getting ready to put this together, another wave arises and then it falls. And I feel her presence all the time. And I guess I'm just grateful. That's the largest feeling, is I'm left with gratitude that she got to go the way she wanted, and so.
And the last thing I want to share is just encouragement for each of you to talk with your family. If Mom hadn't talked with us before this, saying, if something major happened to me, I wouldn't want to get treatment, it would have been much more difficult. But we could accept it on the day that we learned that she had very little time left. So please talk about it. By your being here, obviously you're able to deal with the issue of death. I thank you very much, and we're available for questions. Yes.
I want to thank you for sharing the story. I want to thank you very much. That means a lot to me. And my respect to your mom. And I hope I can be like that mom someday.
Thank you. Back in the back? Yes.
If you can hold the microphones close to your mouth.
Hi. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I did just want to make kind of a comment, because it doesn't have to be really fast. While the process to get the medication in an order has to happen in that time frame, if it's something that someone's thinking about, the physician's order can sit at the pharmacy for 6 months before it's filled, and the medication, once it's delivered, can be available for up to 6 months after it's been delivered. So it can be something that you're thinking of, you know it may be coming, but you don't want to have it right away, and you can do it in your own comfort level.
I do want to mention that because the legislation at the time we were going through this was so precarious, we had been told to get the prescription filled as soon as possible, because once the law changes, you can't get the prescription filled. And even if we had the prescription in our possession, if the law had been put on hold, if Mom took it and let anybody know that she took it, it would have been considered suicide. And that has implications for life insurance, for other things. So having it available, and then if the law doesn't go into effect, if somebody still chooses to use it, do not mention it out in public. Yes, please.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I just went through this last week with a friend who was in hospice, but unfortunately he did not choose to pick his own time. And that created a real burden for the people who were trying to support him. And unfortunately, even though we had a rotation, he was by himself when the end came. So there's real power to the ability to schedule your exit and to be able to create the type of atmosphere that you were able to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little quick comment on that. I've helped, in my profession, I've helped people pass, and there are quite a few numbers of people who like to go by themselves. So that doesn't mean that if you choose this option, you have to have somebody with you. Well, you do have to have one person.
Hello.
Where is
Emma.
Go ahead.
Also, thank you very much.
I didn't associate with a diagnosis such as the cancer that the faculties could go so fast from that diagnosis. So that startled me a little and made me wonder if another ingredient that might have come into play, but didn't have to for you folks, is in fact having some therapy or addressing some prolonging of life, not because the choice is to have a longer life, but to keep the faculties within the framework of the law. Did I make that a clear question?
What is the question? No.
I mean, because it would make it even more difficult if one is assisting. If I'm having to juggle having treatment that I don't really want, but the only purpose of my treatment is to be sure I'm still swallowing by the time all the steps have been taken care of. That's an additional stress point. So, I don't know, did that even occur for your situation?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you.
I've been notified that we have 1 minute, one real fast
One
question.
final question, yeah.
Just one quick question. How easy was it for you to find a physician that would go along with this right away? Because, you know, you have so many physicians that will not.
Right.
And it seemed like you got one right away.
In the work that I've done, I had a list of hospices, and I just started calling them. And they said, yes, we provide everything. The hospice.
Some hospices, only very limited numbers. So we were fortunate that she and Mother had happened to go to a program to learn about it before we ever faced the situation. You have to call them, but interim health care is the one we chose, but we don't know the others.
Quick question. How many days were involved from the time she had the diagnosis until she died?
2 months.
2 months. Thank you.
Also, thank you so much, Marge and Loretta. Thanks for sharing. These are warriors for the End-of-Life Option Act. We've heard them at the Universalist Church, Unitarian Universalist Church in Hillcrest a while back, and they're just wonderful people to be part of this movement.
Lovers, not warriors.
Okay, lovers. At any case, I forgot your Buddhist. Yeah, so in any case, thanks so much for sharing your story. I just want to mention that one of our guests today on the panel is Judy Schnack, who's with End of Life Choices California. It's a group that works to develop relationships between patients and healthcare providers, patients that might like to take advantage of the End-of-Life Option Act. She's going to be at the end of the program, so she's probably going to be able to give you some good information of the type you're asking for right now. So without any further ado, let's hear from our second let's hear our second story. I guess I think of these as stories in many ways. The next person who's going to talk to us is Lori and Faye, our group's founder. Lori is the daughter of Nancy Appleton, who was a member of Hemlock and who died at the V not very long ago using the End-of-Life Option Act. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her experience. And Faye, of course, was a friend of Nancy's, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what that seemed like to her as a friend. So I'm going to let Lori come up and talk to us about her experience. And Faye, yeah, of course.
I'm really nervous. Just saying. I'm thankful Faye's with me. And I might cry. I was going to do this organically and just tell my story, and they did it so lovely. But I thought for me, since my mom made the decision just 1 month ago, to end her life. I thought it'd be easier for me to write it. Maybe I can't read it. But anyways, here we go, we'll try. My name's Lori, and I was honored when Faye asked me to come and speak to you today. Again, I'm sorry I'm reading this, but I think that's just what I have to do. Faye was a dear friend of Mom's, and I'm so thankful when Mom asked Faye to be there by her side with us and the family while she decided to go through the process, and Faye graciously accepted, which
I
means
asked myself, actually.
means the world to me because I have forever support with Faye.
Oh, and your brother and your husband?
Well, we have a very small family. It was my brother, my husband. I chose not to have my 23-year-old twins there. They got to say their goodbyes 2 days before. So, but I can't even see. Right, sorry. Mom was kept calling it a celebration, not a passing. But my mother, Nancy Appleton, passed away at age 84 on December 21st with death with dignity. In honor of my mom, I'd like to share with you her favorite quotation, which was, "Friendship is holding the other person as they are, until they can become what they want to become, helped on by the love of the other person." There's so much to read. Mom was a strong, independent woman who chose to be in control of her life. Death with dignity is about respecting a person's ultimate authority of their own path. It is a demonstration of love, an honor, a way to honor someone and to support them through their life and death. A member of the Hemlock Society, a good friend of Faye's, a nutritionist and noted author in nutrition field, she fought until her passing. On September 30th, I took my mom shopping for shoes. She fell and she broke her wrist. I spent the day with her in the emergency room, and that day I had no idea she would never return home. She moved from her independent home at V La Jolla into the skilled nursing facility to recover from the broken wrist. It was just 3 days later, she was diagnosed with Merkel cell cancer with a life expectancy of less than 6 months. She wasn't going to let the diagnosis take her life, so she fought. Unfortunately, it was aggressive and had metastasized, and she was losing strength and her memory. Luckily, she was local, so I could visit every day, reflect and remember a life well lived, with no regrets. We called, we visited friends, we took drives, we enjoyed home-cooked meals that I brought to her, looked at photos, and sometimes just sat in silence. In mid-November, just 2 months later, after much deterioration, she asked the skilled nursing doctor about the death with dignity option that she knew all so well. He referred her to Dr. Bob Ooslander. There's the name. Dr. Bob, as they call him. He specializes in palliative care and end-of-life care for patients who are facing serious and terminal conditions. Mom called Dr. Bob immediately, who came to visit and discuss the end-of-life options. She signed the agreement with him to facilitate the process. Then was the 15-day waiting period. On December 11th, Dr. Bob returned to complete the paperwork, and this time to meet again with myself, my brother, my husband, to discuss the process. Family asked questions, but Mom just listened. She was not ready for the medicine at that time. This was her decision. We supported her, and we felt she would know when she was ready. During the next 8 days, Mom set dates for taking the medicine. Then she'd change her mind. Then she'd reschedule over and over and over again. I felt her constant scheduling and unscheduling meant she wasn't ready. So I scheduled a meeting with Elizabeth, who's a spiritual counselor in Dr. Bob's office, and she came to talk with me and Mom about her thoughts. On December 19th, on my daily visit, Mom said she wanted me to take her to a primary care doctor. I wasn't clear why she wanted to go, but I obliged, and we went to the doctor and walked in without an appointment. And to my amazement, there he was, standing there in the reception. And I'm like, Mom's here. We need to talk. He motioned us in. He allowed us to come and speak with him. And he graciously, then Mom began to thank him for being so wonderful over the past 12 years of his care with her. And she said she was going to miss him and not see him anymore. I was shocked because I didn't really know that she had made the choice. So he looked at me and said, "What's she saying?" And I said, "Death with dignity." He said, "I just helped a patient do this last week." And I said, "Are you kidding? Are you perhaps available this week? It's Christmas week." And he said, "I will change any of my plans to be there. I love that woman." I smiled and said I'd call him. In the car on the way home, I said, "Mom, does this mean you're ready?" She said, "Yes. I'm tired of the pain and I don't want to live like this. Please order the medicine and call Dr. D." Our meeting with Elizabeth was that afternoon. Elizabeth walked in. I said to Mom, "Do you remember, Mom, why Elizabeth is here?" And she said, "Yes, to talk about the potion." At the end of the meeting, she asked Elizabeth to order the medicine, and she did. The pharmacist then talked to Mom. I called Dr. Dominguez, and we scheduled the taking of the potion for Saturday morning. Mom and I cried, and that afternoon we called her friends one by one. Some of her dearest friends she's known all her life. Friday, I went back. We continued the calls, reflected on her life, a life well lived. You're going to have to read that part.
Put my glasses.
I'll try. The hardest thing she said is, "I will never see you again, my sweet daughter." I'm almost done. "We will always be together, Mom," I replied. "Don't worry. No regrets." Sorry. Saturday was the day. My brother, my husband, and I returned early morning, greeted Mom with hugs, which continued that morning as Mom loved hugs. Oh, I can't read. I can't see. We're almost done.
I can start.
We reminisced over photos and cards that she saved from her loved ones over the years. We read them out loud, and she smiled. Her friend came to visit. They sat in silence and held each other's hands. It was now 9 a.m., and it was time to take the anti-nausea medicine. Then the wait began. We had 1 hour. We continued reminiscing. By 10 a.m., Faye and Dr. Dominguez arrived, hugs from all. At 10:45, it was time to take the first potion, as Mom called it. Dr. D mixed it up, and he handed it to her. "Why are you all staring at me?" she said. "Because we love you," I replied. Sitting on her bed, the next 30 minutes were long, and she recalled her travels, one of her favorite topics, as she had traveled to over 120 countries in her lifetime. 11:15, she drank the last potion. I believe it was 4 ounces, and she had to drink it within 2 minutes. She complained of the taste, coughed a few times, and drifted into a deep sleep. My brother and I held her hands. She didn't move. She didn't make sounds other than breathing, and she was finally at peace. Her breath slowed, and finally her heart rate stopped at 12:06. It was 50 minutes. If you guys have questions, I was kind of going to organically say a couple things. I don't know how much time we have. Okay. But I think my mom knew the exact timing. She timed it perfect. The week before, 8 days before, she was not ready because she was vacillating so much. Oops. And the day that she decided, she was telling everybody how she said it was, "I'm going to take my life tomorrow." But she, on her own, had me take her to the doctor to say goodbyes. On her own, she called all her friends. She was ready. She knew it was okay. And we all were okay with that because she was ready. Not one of her friends rejected or had any controversy. It was 100% support, and that's why her friends are her friends, right? After her passing, we were sitting there, and the nurses came up to us one by one and said, "Your mom was a brave woman. She was in a lot of pain, more than you know. She had been on morphine every 2 hours for the past 2 days. When we were coming to visit, she asked the nurses to bathe her and get her ready and look presentable so she could hide some of her pain and struggling. So we know then that that was a blessing for us, that they could share that with us. So we knew that the timing was right. Having the doctor there was a big deal. I could not have navigated that. I'm a basket case. And he kept me at peace. He kept me calm. He kept us focused. He kept us just centered, just relaxed, because he had said, too, it might take just 10 minutes. When half an hour, 40 minutes, I'm like, did we give her the right amount? What did I do? What's going on? He said, it's okay. This is natural. Do you see her breath? You know? And so that just made it all calming. Another name is Dr. Ryan Dominguez. He's actually a general practice doctor. He had only done this once before. We were at the right place at the right time. He canceled his Christmas plans with his mother to do this with us. His being and his presence and his, some things I'm not going to say, but he has a gift. And if you guys need somebody by your side, he's another one. Dr. Urslander would have done it, but my mom had only known him and seen him twice. This is a doctor my mom, when she first moved to San Diego, her first doctor, and is her last doctor. So that was nice. The last thing is the V. My mom lived at the V in La Jolla, and they're very supportive. There had been several people who had done this with Death with Dignity in the independent living, but my mom was in the care center, and I guess we made history because we were the first. And they were very, very, very supportive. The director doesn't work on Saturdays. She came in to be there to make sure the entire staff was sympathetic, empathetic, not coming in and out and giving us our space and saying the right, most beautiful things. So V was great. So that's it. Oh, and the cost. The last thing, somebody wanted me to address cost. The medicine cost $800, and Urslander's fee was $3,000 to facilitate the forms and getting you have to have 2 doctors sign. And we could have done it, but I was in no place to do it. So we hired him to get all the sign-offs and the paperwork in order.
Question. You said it took less than an hour for her to
50
pass?
minutes, 50. Yeah. And apparently the doctor, our doctor, knew that, but if you put her on the left side of the body, it goes a little quicker for some reason, rather than laying on your back or your right side. I don't know, maybe the organs, the heart, and the medicine goes to the heart quicker. I'm not sure, but he gently moved her to her left side.
I think we need to congratulate Faye for having V agree to this sort of thing. As I understood in the past, they were not that cooperative. Is that true, Faye?
I can't take credit for it, but Lori and Nancy, it was so natural. The door was open where she was. Her room was next to the elevator. People kept coming in and out. I had a slide of her. She wrote many books, as Lori didn't say, many of them on sugar. And there was somebody came in and with her book said, would you autograph this for me? I've got a picture of her autographing the book, smile on her face, 5 minutes before she died. I mean, it was such an open, natural process. It was amazing. And I was surprised at the V that it went that smoothly and that the nursing staff was so sympathetic, because we had talked to a doctor about a week before, and he was a little hesitant, I would say. Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. And I think I remember you said that one of the last things your mom said was no regrets. Do I have that right? What are some of your regrets? This is so difficult, it appears, to remember the experience. Do you feel like you have any regrets?
Wow, good question. I'm trying not to, so I'm trying, one of those thoughts come in my head.
Speak in the microphone.
when those thoughts come in my head, like they did today, I'm trying to process them in a positive way so I don't have the regrets. I guess I'll share. One of them was this morning I was walking with my husband, and my regret was, and Faye was there, and I'm like so like embarrassed almost, because after my mom took the first potion, we had an hour, right? Well, I would have said, if I had done it to my kids, oh my gosh, I love you so much, take care of each other, you guys have been a blessing, all these things. And my mother didn't say anything to us, nor did we really say anything like I love you to her at that time. But in reflection, that's who we were. We were more of huggers and feelers than verbal communicators. And I had 12 weeks to do that, which, as I'm reflecting, I did. So that day, maybe I could have orchestrated it a little better, but I didn't plan it. I liked what they did and had a little more of a celebration and dressed up, because Mom kept calling it a celebration. So I wish I wore my party clothes.
Lori was the best daughter you could ever imagine. I mean, this went on for a long time. Lori made Nancy's room full of pictures and souvenirs and her favorite furniture and everything. She was an amazing daughter. I really, everybody should have such a daughter like you.
One other thing about that, I believe she knew anyway.
Thank
Of course she knew.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We have two. Oh, sorry.
Richard?
The $800 medication, what was the name of that medication?
It was a combination.
I'm sorry, I
That's
don't know.
far less expensive than many of the other.
Yeah, it was you had to take some anti-nausea pills
Yes.
first.
Yes.
And then 2 different potions spread out in a period of time. And
Something
I'm
that
sorry, I
slowed-
don't know.
Something that slowed the heart after the antiemetic. And then a combination of 3 drugs, which I can't remember right
She
now.
says we're done.
It's, yes, well, she's the authority on the subject, but, but we're just ignoring her. It's a different formula than when the law first passed. It was a Seconal, and now that's prohibited, can't get that in the United States or even in France either, so unless you're a dog or cat, then.
She says we need to stop.
I want to reinforce what you said about your mother. My wife and I lived at the V for about 6 years. I got to know Nancy a couple different ways. We got a tech group, but the main one is she mentioned to me at one time she was ordering special bread, and the quantity was pretty large, and I was interested. So the next thing we know, every so often I'd be up to her apartment. She'd be splitting the bread order with me, and this went on for quite a while, and so I got sort of acquainted. So every time I saw her over the last couple of years, particularly, say how you doing, and with the smile, I could see she was struggling. Like you said, you're not real verbal people, but she sort of reinforced that things are okay. I'm real pleased with your presentation, though. It's very touching.
Thank you so much.
I'll add to that. You told everybody that your mother was a nutritionalist. Well, she was an amazing nutritionist. She had written so many books. I bought, for my book club, I bought about 10 of her books and gave it to everybody. So every time there was a speaker about nutrition, I would go to her and say, do you approve? Do you approve? And she would say yes or no.
Oh, cute. Thank you for sharing.
Wonderful
Her books
person.
were on the evils of sugar, and
Thank you for
her
sharing.
last dietary concerns were she had no sugar, of course, she never had, also no carbs. It didn't help, so so eat away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know our time is sort of running along here, so we have a third individual who's going to speak to us, and this is Linda Engel, and she's a bit different than the other 2 cases we've seen. Linda's husband, Ray Engel, requested the medication, thought he was going to use the End-of-Life Option Act to terminate his life, but decided not to. And so I thought it was important that you hear from Linda as well, because it shows that people who request request the medication may determine at some point they really don't need it, or at least they think they don't. And so I'm anxious to hear what Linda can tell us about her husband, Ray. Oh, is this better? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Linda Engel. My husband, Raphael Engel, passed away August of 2019. And he was just turned 85 years old. And it was quite a journey. He was a remarkable man, very independent, loving and caring, and very strong. Let me give you a little bit of an idea about his life. He was born June 6, 1934. And when he was 6 years old, his mother died of meningitis. Right after that, he got polio and was in a hospital for a year. He used crutches for a while once he got out of the hospital, but he never let polio get in his way. He had so many medical problems, and yet he was a fighter. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in June of 2013. The oncologist that we saw said, "You have 6 months to live. If you don't have chemotherapy, you have 3 months to live." So we got another oncologist. And he went through 2 rounds of chemo, he went through radiation, he went through a study, and finally the lung cancer took over. In October of 2018, he went on hospice. And he was taking all kinds of medications that were counterindicated, and hospice took him off of all of those. But in the meantime, he got very, very ill, and that's when he talked to Dr. Bob and ordered the medications because he was ready to go. Hospice saved his life. It gave him, he said, "I haven't felt this well in years," and it gave him approximately 6 months of good health. Towards the end, we lived in V. We moved to V in May of 2017, and he ended up in the care center a number of times, and they were very supportive, but at the time he was thinking about the end-of-life option, they weren't very supportive with that, and you had to be very quiet. I wanted to talk a little bit about how strong he was. He was actually at dinner 2 nights before he passed away, and people said, "How are you?" And he said, "Great." And it was just amazing. I mean, it was my honor to be married to him, and we were married 13 years. I knew him 20, and he was just a real honorable man. I wanted to talk a little bit about preparation, because people don't talk about death, and thanks to Faye, we got a lot of information. We actually went to a death cafe where we broke up in small groups, and people talked about preparations for death, and it's never too early to get started. You need to have your paperwork together. You need to have a health directive. Your family needs to know what your wishes are, because oftentimes when you end up in the hospital, they'll do what they want to do. So you really have to have an advocate set up for you. I'm trying to think what else. He was a very well-known graphic designer, and he was at the time of Eames and knew them. Mid-century modern was his love, and our apartment is furnished like that. So that was really quite special. I'm trying to think what else. Dr. Bob was very, very supportive, and when he was feeling well, he had second thoughts about the end-of-life option. And we actually invited Dr. Bob to come talk to him, and he was incredibly supportive and said, "You don't have to do this just because you have the medication." He said, "It's your choice." And what happened was he became mentally impaired towards the end. And he stayed in the apartment for the whole time except the night before, and a couple of stints in the care center, but the night before he was just delirious, and we had to give him more nursing care, and he died the next morning. So it was really a peaceful death. Hospice gave him all the pain medication that he needed. I can't encourage people enough to keep that in mind, because they really were a lifesaver. And I probably haven't even gone the 5 minutes, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Wait, can you wait till you get a microphone so everybody can hear you?
Thank you so much. Which hospice did you use?
We used Lightbridge, and at the time, they did not want to be present if he took the option, and V didn't want to be present if he took the option, although they knew that he was prepared to do that.
Thank you.
A simple question, actually. Closer. Okay. What exactly is V, and where is it?
Oh,
and what do they do?
it's a retirement home over in University City, adjacent to UTC. So there are 2 high-rise independent living, and there is a care center in between where they have assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing.
And is it just like V?
VI.
Everybody from V here, raise their hand.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
VI, right.
I'm a little bit confused. Did he actually use the?
No, he opted
Okay.
to not use it, and his memory was gone, and he wasn't able to swallow towards the end. So even if he had wanted to, he wasn't aware of things, and so he couldn't use the option.
So he essentially died naturally, but
He did.
He was prepared to do that.
I think he was really ready, yes, to go, and because he wasn't in significant pain, I think he was at peace.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question that could be any one of the speakers. Most pharmacies you go to, if you ask for something exotic, it takes a week to get it. What's the story with this end-of-life medication? Yes?
They delivered it in 3 hours.
Yeah, yeah. You have to go to
Who
certain...
is they?
It was someplace, I don't know, Dr. Bob.
Mhm.
It's a compounding pharmacy in Escondido.
Right.
They had it into La Jolla within 3 hours.
Right. Yeah, they did. They didn't want to come in, so I met them out in the driveway.
They call that a drug drop.
Right, right.
And I wondered if he died in your own apartment.
No, he was in the apartment for the full time. The night before, he got very ill, and he couldn't swallow at the time, and he became pretty comatose. So he had to, with hospice's help, we moved him to the care center, and I had an overnight caregiver with him. The other thing that I didn't mention is that when he was ill and had a harder time getting around, it's really important for the caregivers, for the loved ones, to have someone to relieve you for a few hours so that you can go to the grocery store, make telephone calls, do whatever you need. And we had those when he went into hospice. We got a caregiver. So it was a 4-hour caregiver, but most of the time he stayed in the apartment.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a longtime hospice RN, and I can't thank you enough for the positive comment about hospice.
Well, you're most welcome, and they just did wonderful things.
Linda, like you, my husband also chose the end-of-life medication and didn't use it, primarily because he became comatose. He was a physician and a veterinarian, and was very much in support of his own ability to decide when. Had hoped that hospice would get him through and he wouldn't need to use it. But ultimately, his first organ to fail was his brain, and he never had the chance. So there's a lot of people that fall into that category that have the medication but aren't able to use it. And then that's a problem. That's something I'll fight for from here on out.
Right.
A different choice.
Right. And I think it's very important for the person who is dealing with illness to be able to make their own choices, because towards the end, depending on circumstances, hospitals, doctors try to do all kinds of brave things, and it costs so much money, and it just causes all kinds of continued problems. So I'm just grateful that he passed peacefully and he's in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We really appreciate your story. And I guess our last speaker is Judy Schnack, who's with End of Life Choices California. And she'll tell you about that organization, but they work actively to connect people who have some terminal condition with healthcare providers that would be sympathetic and supportive of End of Life Option Act. And without any further ado, I'll let her speak to you and tell you what her organization does. Judy?
Well, first of all, thank you all for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. I know I'm speaking to the choir. And I just want to tell you to thank these wonderful speakers, because all that they've told you is really important and true. So the End of Life Choices California is an organization that's just come into being. You're all familiar with the big organization, Compassion and Choices. So they're an advocacy group nationally that helps states to pass the medical aid in dying law. They had a volunteer program that would assist people who were wanting to use the law, and they stopped that program in 2018. So in 2019, 4 of those volunteers got together because they felt that this was a need that was not being met. And actually, one of the founders is in the audience here, Claudia. So hopefully Claudia will help me answer any questions you might have. Anyway, these 4 women volunteers got together and formed End of Life Choices California. And it's similar to some of the organizations that are in Washington and Oregon. And I'm going to just read you the mission statement. All Californians dealing with terminal or chronic illness deserve accurate information and access to all available legal options concerning their end-of-life issues. So, since February of last year, there have been 2 volunteer trainings. Volunteers are retired. I'm a retired hospice nurse practitioner. We have doctors, we have social workers, business people, because it's strictly a grassroots organization, so we need grant writers and people who can raise funds. Anyway, everybody has a bit of knowledge to contribute to this effort. The important thing, and you've heard this from the folks up here, is to know what your options are at the end of life, because doctors aren't so willing to share that information. The system is not designed to provide that information. So this is what our organization does. There's a lot of education. One of the first things is to consider stopping unwanted medical treatment. So particularly with cancer, it's like the oncologist always has another drug for you to try, but maybe that's only going to give you a couple of weeks or months, and you may spend your time in the bathroom or at the doctor's office getting blood draws, x-rays, all of that, and some people don't want to spend their last days doing those things. So, and unless you're involved in a palliative care program, which has a tendency to see the big picture, doctors are kind of reluctant to say, you know, if you want to stop, you can stop. We have to be our own advocates. Other things might involve considering whether you want to stop dialysis. So if you have anybody in your family who's been on dialysis, that's a full-time job. It's, hours, at least 3 days a week, 8 hours a day. And then there are cardiac medications, too, that you might want to consider not taking because they have the ability to extend our lives in some cases. And then the other program that we can help support is VSED, which means voluntary stopping eating and drinking. And I know Dr. Uslander, who you've heard mentioned a lot, has been here to talk to this group about VSED. So it's perfectly legal. You just make a decision that you want to stop eating and drinking. It sounds simple, but it's not. It requires almost 24-hour help. Many facilities, if you're in a facility, won't allow it. So that's something to be cautious about if you or your family member is going to be moving into a facility. It really requires the support of family members and perhaps medical input as well, hopefully hospice, because it helps to have some medication for anxiety or nausea or pain that you might need to do that. And that's a process that takes maybe 10 days. I know it's kind of hard to give time limits here, as we've heard. But oftentimes, after 3 or 4 days, a person will slip into unconsciousness, and then, it becomes taking care of somebody who's in bed. Okay, let's see, we better move along here. Education. We talk a lot about what hospice provides and what palliative care is, and also palliative sedation. And then we actually help people use the law. So most of the calls that we field are about people who want information using the law. Oftentimes, as you've heard, the obstacles remain about physicians who are willing to assist people. It's still a very small group. I know that Kaiser physicians are doing it. In San Diego, Dr. Uslander is still kind of the lone physician. I do know the other problem is getting hospices on board. So we spend a lot of time talking with hospices about this. And as has been mentioned, interim health care, which has been in the community for many years, has the gift of hospice, and they have physicians who will write the prescription. They have staff who are all on board to help people with this. And I think you may be, if you're not familiar with the requirements of the law, we have brochures about their organization, but it's 2 physicians saying that you have a life expectancy of 6 months or less, like a hospice diagnosis, and you have to be of sound mind to make that decision. That's probably the most important thing. So our role is to provide education and support to the family. We can attend the death. I can tell you that the first one I attended with Claudia was back in, I took the training in June, and I think we were sitting with this lovely lady in July, and she was a Kaiser patient. She had end-stage cardiac disease, so she was not very comfortable, oxygen dependent. And her son was advocating for her. Kaiser has a very smooth program, and they're really set up for this. And so Claudia and I were there on the day that the medication was being delivered. So the pharmacist arrived, we listened to all the instructions, and I'll have to tell you about timing. The pharmacy gave them a window of maybe a few minutes to 30 hours. And I've been on calls hearing that it can take a long time, because when the law first came into effect, we had Seconal, which is an old barbiturate sleeping pill, which works pretty quickly. But the new combination has some issues to it, and so they're finding that it can take a longer period of time. I was just on a call last week about a patient in Sacramento who used it, and it took 10 hours. So it can take time. I've also heard there were physicians don't need to attend. It's often family members, and we will attend if the family needs support. So with this, lovely lady in San Marcos, the family wanted help to mix the medication, so we did that. And first, there's an antiemetic that is given, and then the medication, the lethal medication, is a mixture of 4 drugs. And I know there was a question about this, so it's digoxin or digitalis, which is an old cardiac drug. It's Valium, morphine, and the last one, there's either propranolol, which is a cardiac drug, or amitriptyline. And there have been some strange reactions to the amitriptyline, but they're all in very big doses. And so the lady that we were with, as soon as the medication arrived, she wanted to take it. Because her son said, hey, maybe you want to wait until tomorrow. You can have some coffee, you can have some chocolate. But she said no. She wanted to take it then. So we proceeded to kind of help her with the timing. They take the antiemetic, and then 4 hours, or 1 hour later exactly, they take the medication. So it's a powder that's mixed in 3 ounces of a liquid. I think we had apple juice. You need to drink it quickly because it thickens over time, so it turns into something like Metamucil, if anybody knows what that's like. So what else can I say? I'm running out of time. Just know that we're all volunteers. There's no charge for any of this. And tips. I was asked to talk about tips. Check with your own physician to see if he goes along with this. And if not, you have a choice of finding somebody like Dr. Uslander or finding another physician. And do everything early. I think everybody said that. Do everything early. If you haven't done your paperwork, if you haven't talked to your family, if you haven't talked to your doctor, do it tomorrow. Tomorrow's a holiday. Do it the next day. You can't do it soon enough, especially if you're dealing with dementia. Dementia is the big elephant in the room because dementia patients are not eligible to use the law. Figure out what's important to you and how you want to spend those last days and weeks and months of your life. Write it down. Write it down. Tell everyone in your family. Choosing a decision maker is extremely important. And the most recent thing that I've heard, which is really a great idea, is to make a video. Because especially in cases where there's some mental changes, if your family member, and they're the ones who have the greatest difficulty with this, if they can see you healthy and saying what you want, it makes it much easier for them to make decisions for you that involve ending your life. So, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Judy. I'm sure they're going to be, don't leave, because I'm sure there's going to be a few questions for you. We'll give 5 minutes of questions for Judy, and then we'll just actually throw it open to anybody who wants to ask a question. Before we even start the questions, though, I want to ask or tell people, before we do anything, I want to mention to people that we, because this is our first time here at Vision, we decided to really spring for some snacks and soft drinks and stuff. And so they're out there in the hallway there. And so at the end of the meeting, feel free to go by, pick up a muffin or a cookie or whatever else is out there. There's some, even if you want just a water, but go out there and hang out and chat with each other, and hopefully, we'll have a chance to chat with you a little bit as well. So remember, that's waiting for you at the end of the question and answer period. With that thought in mind, questions for Judy.
Can the person use a straw?
Yes. Who's asking? Oh, yes. Yeah, in fact, that's recommended. Yeah, they need they usually suggest a large bore straw because, it's a powder that you're mixing in only 3 ounces, so it helps to have it in a good liquid form and able to swallow it that way.
Following up on your comments about paperwork, 2 months ago, my brother-in-law passed away, had done no paperwork, but when my sister took him to the hospital, he'd been sick for about 2 months, went to the hospital, and he's in emergency intensive care, but fortunately he was coherent, and he did make out paperwork, some of the proper paperwork, so they would stop feeding him and stop oxygen and stop so forth. But the hospitals are always trying, as you pointed out, trying to do things. So when I wanted to get him transferred, they wanted him out of the hospital before he died, so it was like within 12 hours. Number two, when the ambulance picked him up, and I tried to avoid an ambulance, but we couldn't, they showed up a quarter-mile later. He had oxygen and everything else in him because the ambulance company doesn't want him dying in the ambulance. So the paperwork, even when you do your best, sometimes is a problem.
Yeah, that's why I think, I mean, everybody always asks the question, well, what if I end up in the emergency room? Who's gonna, all your paperwork's at home in your file cabinet. So the default is to call your next of kin, your family member. That's why it's important to let everybody know how you feel about it. And I've went through a horrible experience with my husband. He died in the ICU, which I wouldn't wish on anyone. And so my children are on board with this. They think I talk too much about it, so I don't think that's possible, but anyway. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's ever a possibility in legislation that we could state our wishes to utilize the end-of-life drug before we ever get dementia, and that if we get into dementia,
yes,
the previous decision on document is what gets honored.
Yeah, there are lots of what they call addendums to your advance directive that deal with dementia. The important thing about dementia is where you draw the line for treatment. So if you go onto our website, there are brochures out there. On the website, there is a really good form. It says, what if I had dementia? And dementia is a long process, early, middle, late stage. And so you get to choose at each stage what you would want. And so I have filled out that form for myself. The other thing is on Compassion and Choices website, they have a dementia decision-making process. And I actually played with that yesterday. And in the end, you end up with all the things you would want to stop being fed for. Because I've spent a lot of time with end-stage dementia patients, and you'll be fed until you can't swallow anymore. And it's tremendous suffering, is how I see it.
I want to know, since dementia is not acceptable as just dementia, so what if you're not in an end-of-life disease or illness, but like my big thing is, I'm not there at this point, but if I get to be dementiaed, I don't want to be here anymore.
Right.
And I told that to my son, and he's the one that sent me the information about this meeting. And I like knowing who I am and where I am and what I'm doing and who my friends are. What am I going to do if I get to that point and I don't want to be here anymore?
You make it explicit in your paperwork. And
Which
explicit
paperwork?
with your son. So this is what I did yesterday. If you go online to Compassion and Choices and use their dementia tool, it really helps you to say, if I can't dress myself anymore, if I don't recognize my loved ones anymore. And that was it for me. Then I want you to stop feeding me.
So that's the only way to do it? Because it apparently...
Yes, yeah,
No,
there
but
are
what
different...
let's say you're not, right now, I'm almost 77, I'm not on any meds whatsoever.
Right.
There isn't anything physically at this
Yeah.
point wrong with me.
That's
This is a
good.
blessing, I suppose.
Yeah.
But mentally, what happens if I go before I go physically? I don't want to be around.
So you have to now state what you want, right now, while you're of sound mind and healthy.
But you said I need to have 6 months or less of life to be able to do...
that's to use the law.
Oh, so you can do it without the law?
Yeah, no, let me just clarify one thing here.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, we do not have in this country the ability to request ahead of time to end our lives or have our lives ended when we become demented. So there's nothing you can do other than request that you don't receive certain medical care, certain procedures, and that you don't be force-fed, hand-fed. But those are the only two things really that you can request. You can't request ahead of time that when you get to a certain level of dementia that you be given a medication to end your life. It does. That is an option in certain European countries, West European countries, and even in Canada now, we've had a couple cases of essentially a person being able to, with dementia, I guess it was Alzheimer's, being able to specify that they wanted to end their lives. And we heard a wonderful talk from a Canadian doctor, I think it was our last meeting, about the work they're doing in Canada.
I come from Canada. Maybe I should go back.
You should. Yeah, let me mention one other thing. An option that we didn't say anything about is we're going to have a presentation in May given by the group Final Exit Network. And Final Exit Network is an organization that does not believe that just because you don't have more than 6 months to live, that you should not be able to end your life if you feel that life is unbearable. For various reasons. And so they talk about an alternate way of ending your life peacefully. And we're going to have a presentation by them in May, a wonderful presentation. There's going to be a demonstration. It'll be, I tell you, it's prime time TV. Sorry, Judy.
That's okay, no worries.
I have a question, and one of the ladies mentioned a loved one who was already on morphine. Now, why don't you just up the morphine? Why did you have to go through all the other rigmarole? It seemed to me that an upper dose of morphine would do the job.
Well, I know. I don't know why they don't use fentanyl. It's killing a lot of people on the street. But this is the way the law was written. You know, it could be between you and your physician. I think that people have been figuring out ways to do this for a long time, under the radar, and so now we have a law, and that's what we are obliged to follow.
Yeah.
One final question for Judy, and then
obviously the California law is an improvement of what we had before, but we
Right.
have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting to note that everyone that spoke really had to somehow or another learn about the law on their own and then find people that would help them. We need to improve that situation. It sounds like your organization may be
Yes,
doing that.
if you have anybody you need, like I said, this is the choir, but we would gladly go out and speak to anybody.
And speaking of the system in Canada, the woman that came to talk, it's fully covered by their national insurance. It's called MAID, Medical Aid in Dying. The physicians attend the final ceremony, and they actually inject the potion, and they stand by in case there are any problems. Those are all things that we should be pushing our representatives to do for us.
Recording of her speech is on our website.
Good.
All of our meetings are recorded by Ken Watson back there and are on our website. You can hear her speech.
yeah, it's a wonderful talk, and you should look at our website to see it because she describes in detail some of the procedures you're mentioning. Is our time up for questions, or do we have any more questions to anybody on the panel? I know people get tired after a certain while. Let's have just a few more, and then we'll call it quits for now because we want to get to the snacks. So don't forget, we've got snacks waiting. I'm not sure. I know what that was about. Yeah, I think what you're talking about are I'm not sure what you're talking about there. I know on your chairs, each of you has a little handout which talks about upcoming events we have. We have two things coming up that you definitely want to come to. One is a movie. We have a movie on the 16th, I think it is, of February, A Short Trip to Switzerland, which is a wonderful film, and it's going to be at the Mission Valley Library. And then on February 29th, Dr. Hofer from Sharps.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay, one more question.
I I would like to ask, what happened to Seconal? Is it not available?
It's been off the market for a while now. I don't know. It's available in Canada. I think they use it in Canada, but there's sort of slapped down. In any case, thank you so much for coming. You've been wonderful. And again, take advantage of the snacks and drinks we have. We'd like to get to know you a little bit and say hi. And, you can tell us what you think. And I hope you like our new home. And also, let me mention one thing as you're going out the door, or Mitz will shoot me.